When we speak of the corruption within the minds of the typical man, we're reminded of Paul's warning to Timothy in the New Testament of the dangers in those last days. Good morning, I'm Pastor Ernie of the Blue Point Church in Sisseton, Illinois, with your thoughts for Friday. You know, Paul began 1 Timothy chapter 3 with this phrase, "In the last days, perilous times will come." Then he began to describe these vile people, that they will be lovers of themselves and lovers of money and boasters and proud and without self-control. They'll be lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God. And he warns young Timothy, stay away from these people. Then he tells us about the corrupt thinking of those controlled by their sinful nature. He says in verse 7, always learning, never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds disapproved concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. Paul reminds us what we become when we are controlled by the thinking of our depraved minds. He uses the example of those who resisted Moses' leadership in the Old Testament. Whenever Moses was leading God's people, there were always those who wanted to step in and say, well, I know better. And they were judged, just like Korah and his rebellion were judged in the Old Testament. They think they can think for themselves. They oppose God's direction for their lives. And he says they were ever learning, but never really able to come to the knowledge of the truth. You know, it's just like many of the learned men and women that we have today, those who are leading major universities. They think they have arrived with their knowledge, and yet they reject the belief in God and the truth of the gospel. Unfortunately, you see, men of corrupt minds will resist the truth because it tells them that they're not in control of the universe or even in control of their own lives for that matter. And he said, these will be disapproved concerning the faith, which means we should not allow them to try and lead the church. He tells Timothy to avoid these kind of people. And we know that no matter how far they consider themselves to have progressed, they believe God and religion are a crutch for the weak people. So they consider themselves advanced in their progressive thinking. They think they are superior by their own thoughts. So Paul uses this play on words about seeming progression in society. They will progress no further because God will judge their corrupt thoughts and their minds. This is the sad end of those who, with a corrupt mind, plan to advance themselves against God and his wisdom or his truth of his word for us. Much like Satan, perhaps, they will fall like lightning. Their folly will be manifest to all, he says. When will that exactly happen? Well, perhaps it'll happen whenever Jesus comes, because they will not be expecting his return. Perhaps another judgment will come whenever they seek to oppose God, and of course God has to put them down. One time that they will recognize this judgment is when they end this life and they miss the eternal life that God has promised to all those who trust in him.